I wonder how many EMEA fans I'm going to piss off. Oh, sorry, European. Oh, no, LEC fans am I going to piss off? We'll find out. Welcome, esteemed guests and face checkers. My name is Sam, and this is Vision Denial and Road to MSI 2023. For those who are new here, I watch every single playoff game that happens before a major tournament, either MSI or Worlds, and this time MSI. There is an asterisk, and we're going to talk about that before that. And after, as such, part of the show on a weekly basis, I will bring in my thoughts, announcements, things that are checking up on things, show then snippet clips of all of the different playoffs that I've seen reviewed. Today we're only looking at LLA from Latin America, as they're the only region that has had a playoff. Again, asterisk. Why the asterisk every time? Well, because for everybody who watches the LEC or who has seen the changes, of which I think is stupid, and I think we might as well actually start with the elephant in the room. The LEC has already had a playoff in the winter split where they've, and I have to say this, congratulations on G2 Esports on being the first team to qualify, and so far are doing okay in the spring. So if they do well enough in spring, it'll be fine. But here's my gripe. And you guys let me know in the comments if you agree or don't agree with me. Looking at the situation, winter split having the winner be minimum second seed at MSI feels off in a situation where split by split teams can be radically different. And we've seen teams be radically different even within its own split. And so I don't think it makes sense for them to have that kind of evaluation. And the first seed, even in the spring split, which is the one that they clearly tell is the more important seed to evaluate, is going to play less games than the vast majority of teams who don't even qualify in the playoffs of other regions. Riot Games, please, for the love of God, discontinue this format next year. There are aspects of this that, yes, really shine in terms of being able to find who would be the best candidate for Worlds, but at a cost overall. Teams are very short term. If in a split you're not doing so hot and they need to switch you out, and these splits are so short that they get less of a chance to prove that any improvement overall, some teams play less games than the worst players of the LCS. Hell, the best team in Europe at a given split is going to play less games than the worst team of the LCS in a given split. This doesn't make sense to me. Splitting the year into three and making winter so important, equally important, when in other regions they'll have a winter split, the Demacia Cup, the Kespa Cup. Heck, LCS had the the beginning tournament, the introductory tournament of the year, and those mattered so significantly less. Hell, there was the Rivals thing that was going on, and that made sense. It had people like a taste of what to come situation, and the winter split could have been equivalently so. But adding such an importance to it so early in, when most other regions scoff at having any significant weight that early into the year for whatever team's caliber is going to be at the end of the year, let alone the middle of the year itself for MSI, is baffling. Well, those are my first thoughts on it, at least. We'll see how this trends out. But I have opted to skip this playoff. And I'll be watching the spring playoff. I will not be watching the summer playoff. And I will be watching the season finals, because the season finals is the actual summer playoffs for the EMEA or the LEC. Oh, that's the other thing. Let's talk about the other elephant in the room. The other elephant. Okay. We have lost 3 regions. One of the regions, understandable. Last year, due to the war, we lost the CIS, the LCL, but the CIS region. And for reasons that honestly saddened me, that region could have been completely absorbed by the LEC, and that would have been a fine asterisk. But I think that it is disrespectful from Riot Games to discontinue the LCO, the Oceanic region, and for it to only partially be absorbed by the PCS. For those who are unaware, the PCS usually has 8 teams for their playoffs, and it's a very robust playoff system. It is actually one of the best ones, tied with like the LCS summer playoffs, and you get a very understandable foundation on how, like, which team is definitely the best there. Like, even if you go in first seed, if some other team has a better understanding of how all of the teams work by the time the playoffs run, they'll get it. Much more deserved. And so it is disheartening for me to see that, one, the LCO was abandoned, and with a very creative playoff system that they've created for themselves, not too dissimilar to how the LEC is doing their playoff system, which on their own merit, each split, if given a lot more time, could be pretty interesting. But because they're given not enough time, the actual format has no time to play on its own merit. Same thing with the LCO. Because of their format, the top 2 seeds, the top 2 winners of their own playoff, get to compete in the playoff of the PCS, and as such, 2 teams who would have had the chance to qualify and possibly do well in the PCS playoffs are snubbed out of a spot that they would have previously earned. I think that because of such, it is so disheartening. Because, like, there was the announcement that, oh no, the LCO is no longer getting funding for Riot Games, and then they get picked up by another producer. Totally fine. Great. They can play still. And then they're completely snubbed from the ability to participate in the international scene. And the fact that PCS stepped in and is still allowing them to play is great. But the caliber of these teams is not quite there. And so they're very unlikely to see them even get to play in the international scene. It's a waste of time. You're killing the ability for other teams within the PCS who would have gotten the slot anyways to go through. And it would have been a different thing if they kept the same number of teams and then added LCO teams to it, made a bigger playoff structure, but they don't have the funding, they don't oh crap. It really unnerves me. And equivalently to the fact that the PCS picks up, makes it so that less teams are able to give a chance in the playoffs and see if they can qualify. We have less teams technically that the LCO can actually try to show off for playoffs, because instead now an actual playoff for the LCO is getting to the PCS, and where they would have had 5-6 teams depending on the year and depending on the format they would have chosen, they now only get 2. And those playoffs, top 2 seeds going in don't always perform as expected going into playoffs. And that's the thing that bothers me the most. We are getting fundamentally less teams to prove their mettle to try to qualify for any of these major tournaments for the Worlds format to work. I'm pretty sure the Worlds format would have worked just fine with 24 teams and the same number of regions. Yeah, we were able to get 24 teams with 11 regions beforehand. Because that's the thing. We went from 12 regions to now 9. That's a quarter of all of the competitive fields gone. And sure, right, part of the CIS is kind of absorbed into the LEC. The TCL, the Turkish region, a region that was exciting and yes, was having a downturn over time, but I don't think that counts. There are many smaller regions that have downturns. Hell, there are many like legacy regions that have downturns and then they upswing all of a sudden. But the fact that the TCL is now just a challenger scene in Europe, like, let's be realistic. The LEC is not a field of like, oh yes, we're totally Europe, like Middle East and Africa. It's the European scene. It's a European scene with a couple of imports. The act is not fooling anybody. Adding a couple of Turkish players to a couple of teams does not make it like a Middle Eastern region. Are there even African players in in the scene? There's a Japanese player there. There are Korean players there. We never consider these international. Or interregional like things, intercontinental things. It feels like a ploy to rebrand a region that did not need rebranding. And it just makes the whole thing worse. Oh, it's just so unnerving. It feels really bad. So, just going from 12 regions to 9. Hell, if Riot really wanted to, they could have taken any of the small challenger regions that were not emerging regions yet. And because you had to decommission the CIS, the LCL, you could have just promoted a different region. Japan was promoted. Like the LJL got promoted, and they have only gotten better over time. The VCS was such a region. They were a challenger region in the PCS who got promoted. So why demote all of the regions and not promote new ones for the sake of having 4 seeds in a whole bunch of places and 2 seeds in others? Why is the PCS still having 2 seeds and not 3 seeds? Why did Europe have to have, like, was there needed to be a grudge match between Europe and North America to see who's the last team going? And not like, there were so many questions I have. Please, before I just keep rambling forever, right? Because this format change made it so that G2 qualified way too early. And like, if they make it to first place or even second place in their playoffs, I'll be right behind them. Cool. You made it through. You're in the top 2. I'm convinced you'll probably do incredibly well. Fantastic. But it was too early, and this format change was done to the negative, like, for a negative benefit of the region itself. So many teams are going to play significantly less games overall than their counterparts in every other region. And we decommissioned so many smaller regions for World's new format. And like, the new format is cool. Like, the actual competitive format is cool. The way people like properly like get qualified for Worlds is what has me boiled. Because the 2 regions who are the most affected by this is the PCS and the LEC, 2 legacy regions who have technically gotten downgrades in this sense. And instead of keeping 24 teams and still having a similar kind of format that would have been interesting, we have a random grudge match, which is technically a Worlds game. I don't even want to fucking... It's technically a Worlds game, but turn into a grudge match for a final 20-second slot instead of reallocating it maybe to the PCS, who could have had a third slot. It would have made total sense. keep the rule that the top 2 regions get 4 seeds and the 3 lower legacy regions get 3 seeds. Like, it's not. Please let me know in the comments if you agree with me that the format changes feel worse for the LEC and for the PCS. The fact that they've decommissioned so many regions instead of upgrading other regions means that we'll have significantly less variety at World, and just makes it feel like it's disingenuous to the purpose of what they were trying to do within the LEC, which is more like diversity. I want to know if any others agree with me. But with that, we're going to pass on to at least the 2 playoff series that we've seen, at least from Latin America at this point. They're great. They're fun. They're a lot of fun. So without further ado, let's start. It's the first playoff of spring 2023 and the first one for the LLA's opening playoff series. We've got 6 Karma versus Estral Esports, and it's an upset. Fantastic series out of 6K. Honestly surprised me in some of the best ways. Now, a couple of things. The vision play from both sides leave me wanting a little bit more. At moments, it's solid, and at other times, a little sparse. But it's always shallow and easily removed, holding very little utility overall. Now, the favorites of this series was Estral, which is what everyone expected. And it seemed that the expectations went a little bit in their heads as they played some of the most disrespectful league I have seen in quite a bit of time. Much of the drafts are made with the assumption that they will just outplay in general, whilst having zero cohesive plans in play. 6 Karma looked like they took everything super seriously down to the neutral timings and impressed me with how much control of the tempo and neutral zones they had. That said, their drafts are also a little all over the place, and I wonder how much they will struggle with teams that can match or exceed their neutral play with drafts that are stronger and play to win their win conditions. Overall, I'm excited to see what 6 Karma will bring in the next few rounds, and Estral will have a chance to recover and make arrangements to their attitude. My MVP of the series is Cody for his ability to control the space and really hinder Estral's movement. We're off to the next playoff of the LLA in Latin America. We've got Rainbow 7 versus Isurus Gaming. Now, this was an incredibly fun but equally frustrating series. After what I saw in the previous series, I don't have strong hopes for either of these teams, at least right now. I think that Rainbow 7 had a stronger understanding of each stage of the game, holding stronger approaches to neutral objectives, vision, tempo, and ballooning of gold. But stronger amongst 2 pretty weak teams doesn't give me a lot of confidence. Whatever vision did exist ranged from either inefficient to useless, holding just very little value when it was either cleared right away and or no plays were actually set up in an area they had full control over. Neutral plays look good when they are rarely contested, and you can tell that they just aren't set up properly because any contest that comes in collapses any setup that is even attempted. No skirmish lines, no zone controls or wave priority, just first team to arrive and we're good. Which is super unfortunate because the skill expression is there for these teams, each player having quite a plentiful flavor of talent. And their drafts are also solid on their own merits. The back and forth of the draft phase was excellent this series, but the lack of proactivity to the poor vision and the lack of ability to set up neutral objectives just leaves me with little confidence in either team. Rainbow 7 will move up to the upper bracket, and Isurus will go to the lower and a chance at redemption. My MVP of the series goes to Miru, I hope I said that right, who so handedly controlled the mid-jungle duo during this entire series, it was kind of hilarious. Those were some fun series, not great series. Latin America in and of itself, from the particular 2 series that we've seen from the upper bracket, don't give me a lot of hope overall for how their particular representative is going to go. But it is still early in. And not a lot of the other region, no other region has played yet. Next week we're going to get a lot more play from a lot more regions, and by a lot more I just mean the 2 from LCK and the PCS. And so we're going to start to get a feel for how competition internationally is going to work. Now, the obvious standard is no one is expecting the LLA to work, where obvious go-getters are like the same 5 legacy regions are probably going to do pretty great, and the other 4 emerging regions are going to do well. Oh, the fact that there's only 4 really makes me depressed. That aside, we are in a crux of a situation where it seems like the meta is regressing backwards to something similar that most other playoffs have had. Playoffs of summer 2022, playoffs of spring 2022 also. Those 2 playoffs had very similar kind of approach to the game itself, but only 2 best of 5s are a little soon to make that call. So, I want to get your thoughts. For those who got the chance to watch the LLA playoffs, how did you enjoy them? Because they were fun. There was a lot of excitement, a lot to enjoy from it. But also, does any of it give you the hope that they're going to do okay in MSI? Because I don't think they will. That said, thank you all for watching. Really appreciate it, even through my rambling. Next week, we're going to have a lot more to discuss, a lot more playoffs to review, and maybe a little bit more insight as to some of the trends we should be expecting going into MSI. I want to know all of your thoughts in the comments down below. Just anything at all, from the changes that happen with the formats, to how you think they're actually affecting some of the regions, to if you think this is going to matter even in MSI, or even if you think that, honestly, question for all of you, do you think if MSI is even necessary anymore with the way that Riot Games is trying to change their formats? Any and all of your thoughts I would love to hear in the comments down below. Thank you again for watching. Have a good one, and I'll see you next week. Don't forget to clear your vision.